Oh shit.
Playing another crab's treasure makes you feel like you are receiving an English lesson, but the only words you are taught are a watery grave. Another Crab's Treasure is an indie adventure platform RPG fighting game developed and published by AgroCrab. The main story of Another Crab's Treasure is you play the character of Krill, a little hermit crab who is hanging around a tide pool. While he was doing so, he was approached by a loan shark, who was actually just a silly-looking stick shark thing, and was informed that he owed back taxes. Krill's a broke bitch, so Shark Boy repossessed his shell as collateral. Now Krill has to go on an adventure to get his shell back, and you have to help him along the way by controlling his every action. Just don't get him killed too hard. The game definitely doesn't target people who want to hear a crazy story with lots of depth or twists and turns. It's pretty straightforward. You're just a crab trying to get his shell back, and all sorts of stupid funny nonsense happens along the way. And sometimes, there's very challenging gameplay. You can play Another Crab's Treasure with a mouse and keyboard or a controller, and is available on these listed platforms. Here are the menu settings. There is no cross-saving or cross-play, as this game is single-player only. The graphics in Another Crab's Treasure are decent. There's a cartoony vibe that fits the theme of the game really well. It's colorful and shiny. Little bubbles will appear when you dodge or swing your weapon, which is a cool little detail to add. There's trash laying all over the ground. Gee, I wonder how that got there. The voice acting is also good and on par with a lot of other AAA games, because the characters actually sound like they have a soul and emotions, instead of sounding like they copy and pasted some dialogue into Google Translate and let it rip. And on top of it, the graphics aren't too demanding, with only a GTX 970 required. While you play Another Crab's Treasure, you'll notice that there's a general flow to the game. You'll murder some small mobs, you'll gain microplastics which you will use to level up. You'll talk to some people, get an idea of where your shell is, you'll fight a boss, your shell gets taken away, rinse and repeat, up until the end where you finally get your shell. At least that's why I think what happens. I never beat the game fully. Being that this game is another Souls-like game, you have the typical mechanics that you can come to expect. You have walking, sprinting, jumping, stick your fork into enemies like they are done, you can block, you can dodge, put on and take off your shell after a long hard day. You can hide in your shell. You can use your shell's ability. If you couldn't tell, shells play a huge role in this game. You can heal. You could use your adaption. And finally, you could shoot off a grapple hook, which might be one of the most enjoyable things to do in this game. During this game, you're probably going to get lost quite a bit because you're literally in the bottom of the ocean. Here's the map. It's horrible. You cannot move the map or zoom in at all, but I guess it does have the moon shells marked on it and shows which direction you're facing, so I guess it's at least acceptable. As you progress, you will come across moon snail shells. These are very important as they will keep you from Donkey Konging your console or computer into the wall in frustration. If you're familiar with Dark Souls, these are quite similar to activating bonfires. If you're not familiar with Dark Souls, I'll explain. You explore the ocean and see some currents. You walk up and interact with them, causing a moon snail shell to appear. Going inside one of these shells will cause you to gain all your health back while refilling your heart kelp pods, otherwise known as health potions. You can use the microplastics that you have come across to level up your character. So next time you think about throwing that plastic bottle into the ocean, just remember that you're not really littering, rather you are helping all the poor hermit crabs level up and fight for justice. You can teleport from shell to shell, and if you die, they act as respawn points. Unless you're fighting a boss or special enemy, then the respawn point is right next to them. Since we've discussed the moon snail shells, now it's onto the shells you put on your back to help your survival. These shells help to reduce all incoming damage, regardless if you're hiding in your shell or not. If you are hiding in your shell, all damage will be diverted to your shell's health rather than your own. If your shell breaks, you better find a new one quick, cause without it, your soft fleshy body is ripe for the ripping. On top of that, shells provide a special skill for you to use, depending on what shell you have equipped of course. For example, a soda will gain you the ability to shoot bubbles into the air that attack a nearby enemy. And in this game, there are 69 different shells, all with unique abilities. Each use of a shell skill uses a Unami charge, which is a magic charge that regenerates from attacking enemies with your fork, or by going into a moon snail shell. Finally, shells have different weights to them. The lighter the shell, the quicker you'll be able to dodge, but easier the shell will take to break, similar to the armor weight system making your roll slower in the Dark Souls game. Something that goes hand in hand with the shells you equip are called stowaways. These are modifiers that you can equip that work with any shell you have on, but if you do not have any shell on, these do not work at all. For example, you can have a barnacle equipped that will increase your defense by 10. Each modifier has a point value associated with it, and at the beginning of the game, you can have a max of 3 points used. You can, however, upgrade this later in the game to allow you to have more. Then there are adaptions. Unlike stowaways, these are special attacks that you do not need a shell in order to perform. These attacks are learned through progressing the story or from defeating optional bosses, and just like the shell skills, they use Unami charges in order to use them. An example of an adaptation would be the Royal Wave adaptation. This swings a big claw in front of you, causing those that are hit to take increased damage for a brief amount of time. You can even upgrade these as well, but I haven't came across that yet, so sorry. Furthermore, there are also skills that you can learn that don't require Unami charges to do. From Riposte to having your shells self-regenerate after breaking once per rest, meaning once after visiting a moon shell. These skills are key to helping you defeat whatever creature that stands against you. In order to acquire these skills, you need to acquire purple crystals. These are gained through breaking crystal shard looking things from the ground that you just find while playing the game, or by killing certain enemies. After you have acquired a bunch of these crystals, you teleport to the moon snail's domain to purchase your new skills. It's literally just a skill tree. If you're terrible, refuse to evolve, and get good, you can turn on Little Baby Pansy mode, which can reduce damage taken, lower enemy health, prevent loss of microplastics on death, or even give yourself a gun. The gun is super overpowered as you would imagine against micro critters, but it gives the game a fun new way to play it. While you are traveling across the ocean, like a piece of unwanted trash, you will encounter many enemies along your journey. Some of these enemies, like these little crabs, that just swipe at you don't require too much effort to kill at all. However, the optional and required bosses will definitely require some effort. For example, the Royal Shell Splitter, which is an optional boss, and was the first one that I saw not too far into the game, took me 45 minutes of him bashing my head into the ground as if I were an old wooden chair in the presence of a cokehead after his favorite football team just lost a big game, before I gave up. Granted, it was the first thing I did, and I definitely came back and gave him the old 1-2 forkaroo, but they are certainly tougher than the average enemy. The story bosses aren't slouches themselves either. The Duchess had me frustrated with her poison, and her one stupid move that would take half of my life was a bit too much for me to handle. Keep in mind, however, that this is coming from someone who is horrible at Souls-like games. There's absolutely no pay to win in this game at all. However, I don't think you can specifically design your shells at all, but you can change your crab's outfit if you happen to come across buying or finding one. Possibly the most frustrating thing in this game is dying after you already have died and losing all of your microplastics. But thank God for the assist mode, because you could disable that if wanted. Unless you wanted to be another crab's purist, of course. A not cool feature is there are occasional spots that you will come across that will be glitchy and not allow you to move in certain areas. Like this one I found here. After I died, my microplastics then fell through the ground, and what do you know, didn't have the assist mode on, leaving me to lose all that I had, which definitely made me just quit the game in frustration. The creators of this game know that there's a problem with occasional glitches, as they have a die instantly button on the menu. Thankfully, the glitch that I found wasn't that severe that I needed that button, but it's still important to mention. Another Crab's Treasure is an interesting new take on the Souls-like genre, and one that I think it does very well. The game's environment isn't dark and depressing. You will find many laughable moments along the way. The grapple hook is really fun to use, and the overall gameplay isn't bad itself. But the addition of the assist mode really helped to tailor the game towards how you want to play it. And that definitely helps this game to be more playable to players like me who are terrible. If you are a fan of Dark Souls or games along that line, I would definitely recommend that you at least give this game a try. On our Patent 0 to 1 scale, we rate this game a 0.78 out of 1, mostly because the game isn't completely polished, as there are, like I mentioned before, places where you'll glitch out. But the lively scenery, the little comedic portions in the game, and the addition of the assist mode really give a fresh new take on the Souls-like genre. If you enjoyed this no bullshit review of another Crab's Treasure, please crack open and slurp the meat out of that sub button. Clasp that like button with your pincers and comment your most notable experience with a crab. Thank you, good night, and don't use junk removal services. Just rent a U-Haul and take your junk to the dump yourself. You'll save hundreds of dollars.